What follows is speculation, based on opinion and observation. Despite the topic, don't take it as gospel. Unintended. One of the things I noticed about the Last Supper is that exactly half of the apostles have long hair. Not only that, but the hair lengths alternate consistently, right down the line, when you account for the two sets of crossed necks, which were explained in the previous video. Though not an apostle, of course, Jesus is given long hair, and it's basically a way of imbuing him with feminine aspects. Jesus is the byproduct of the Father and the Holy Spirit or Mother. He has aspects of both parents, and it may be the reason why DaVinci chose to paint his robe as half red to represent the masculine and half blue to represent the feminine. The fact that the blue part of his robe is on the right and the red is on the left is also very telling, and I don't believe it's a coincidence. Blue represents the charged waters that life emerges from. A new, generated life, a son or daughter, leaves the feminine womb for adventure. In leaving, it goes left. Elvis has left the building. This could very easily get into a larger discussion about the meaning behind left and right, which perhaps I'll save for another day. If we make the reasonable association between long hair and femininity, we can take this further, hypothesizing that the long-haired apostles are meant to represent feminine, negative energy, and the short-haired ones are meant to represent masculine, positive energy. It's important to consider negative as a pulling force, not negative as in something bad. Viewing it this way, we are looking at the Last Supper as a model of a celestial battery of sorts, with alternating positive and negative charges. Life requires both aspects of positive and negative, push and pull, exhalation and inhalation, etc. There are so many points to be made here. I simply can't list them all. If it seems like something is missing, it's not for lack of awareness, simply for a lack of sufficient time. This earlier slide from the Last Supper video associated each season with one of the 4 canonical Gospels. Here again, there wasn't enough time to explain why. These associations are based on what each Gospel tends to emphasize, and how those emphasized points align with the chronology or order of the seasons.
Think of sex, it means to end. Summertime.
The book of Luke places particular emphasis on the details of Jesus' birth, his early works, and the establishing of his ministry, things that would have occurred in the metaphorical spring of his life. Also, the name Luke provides us another clue. Luke is derived from the Latin root word lux, which means light. Since it's in the spring in which the days get longer, springtime represents a return to light. So it makes sense that the book of Luke is what kicks off this whole thing. It's also evidence of the sun mythology that is Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, given to us, interestingly enough, by one George Luke Us. Credit goes to Jordan Maxwell, who pointed out this Luke light thing in several presentations and interviews over the years. Following spring, you could say the next season, summer, is marked by the emerging power of Jesus, the S-U-N.
Summertime, I like to sit upon the grass. Autumn nights, I go to...
Summer is a time for action, when the conditions and weather allow us to get things done. So, appropriately, the book of Mark emphasizes Jesus' deeds and accounts for the miracles he performed, 21 to be exact. This would be the rock star Jesus, whose work, for better or worse, begins to draw increasing attention from the public.
Autumn nights, I go to parties with my friends. Winter time is when I think of...
Fall is harvest time. Traditionally in human history, it's when labors have turned to preparing for the cold winter, rest, and if we're being particularly dark, death. Given all of this, It makes sense that the book of John would be a book in which Jesus reminds his audience of the salvation he represents. Points that are particularly timely and logical to make as things get darker en route to winter.
Winter time is when I think about the past. But of course I do all those things all the year round.
Winter, or the late final stages of life, are times for reflection and consideration of the things we've done or witnessed. And the book of Matthew, or Winter, does this primarily. Matthew goes back to the beginning of Jesus' life and recounts his entire journey before it covers the final week of his life to detail the Last Supper, his death, and resurrection. Things that all make sense in terms of points of emphasis and order of occurrence. You can consider this book as a kind of director's cut or post-credit summary of a movie or show you've just finished watching. In last week's Channel 11 Last Supper video, there wasn't great visual evidence to be made in support of James as Aquarius or Bartholomew as Pisces. But there are other considerations beyond the process of elimination that were used to identify these two. James, or Aquarius, is the water sign. Among other things, water has been associated with outer space. This is not a small point. The association between space and water is somewhat elusive, but may have been made because human beings cannot breathe or draw air in outer space, just like we can't draw air when submerged in water. Also, although we can hear things underwater, sound is sufficiently suppressed there, just not to the same degree as it is in outer space. Space and water also both tend to be colder and darker if not affected by some kind of animating force. In other words, space and water can both be viewed as extremely passive mediums or environments, ones that exhibit the properties of the forces they receive. But how does this relate to Jesus' death? And how does this associate January with James and Aquarius? The answer has everything to do with how we consider death, and depends on our belief in eternal spiritual life following material collapse and death. This is what the story of Jesus is about anyway, and viewed this way, it's worth a consideration even if you're a smart, rational skeptic. Because if you don't, you're missing out on something that is in actuality beyond religion. Either way, it's up to you. After Jesus, or the SUN, seems to die in late December or in Capricorn, its eternal essence still remains. But where does it go? It goes up. It resurrects toward the heavens or sky, on its way to outer space or the heavenly waters that it's meant to represent.
Jesus came from outer space and he traveled through beyond the stars. He came down from peace on earth.
Perhaps this space or water is the symbolic maternal womb that holds a spiritual essence before it is born again into material life on earth, if it's due to return there. And perhaps when Jesus resurrects or ascends to heaven, it's not a bodily ascension, but a spiritual one. This is not to offend any Bible-believing literalists, but material bodies simply don't float skyward after death. Somewhere between the material-minded scientific communities and the dogmatic faith-based ones lies an intersection of principles that supports the best aspects of both.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
Fair enough, dude. Pisces the fish is the next and final sign before the cycle of material life repeats, and its placement next to the water of Aquarius makes sense. The fish could represent a few things, but I'd speculate that it suggests the return from death represented by a swimming thing that has been suspended in the waters of space. The last three signs of the zodiac seem to tell the story of material bodily death on earth, ascension of the spirit toward the heavenly waters, and finally a return or swim from those waters back to the material plane again to be born and reemerge bodily in the spring. In the Last Supper, I mentioned in passing that Matthew's job as a tax collector has some interesting implications for the painting. Here's a hypothesis I arrived at while working on that video. Have fun with it, but for the last time, please consider it as speculation. Like anyone else, I'm subject to scotoma, and it's not my intention to mislead anyone. Matthew, according to this model, is Virgo. Virgo starts in August and follows the hottest days of the year. This is the point in the calendar where, due to its angle relative to the sun, the Earth has received the outpouring of the sun's heart at maximum intensity. The portions of solar energy that are gathered during the summer months can be viewed, metaphorically, as taxes. Taxes exist in the form of money. Money is a way of quantifying the value of stored or expended energy, which can be traded and converted back and forth between two or more parties. Virgo, the feminine, in this sense, represents the receipt of those taxes or that solar energy. Keeping in mind that Virgo is an earth sign, think of all that powerful solar energy that the earth and its plant and animal life has gathered up to that point in July. These solar energies and their agricultural byproducts are the taxes being collected that will be needed for the fall harvest to sustain things through the winter. Ain't that cool? I think it is anyway. I couldn't help but notice one very interesting thing about the two Jameses. They are separated by 6 months. James the Greater, meaning the older of the two, is in July, when the sun, Jesus, is at its strongest. The sun is indeed greater in July. But in January, the sun, being less visible to the human eye, was understood as perhaps existing outside of his body, ghost-like, or in spirit only. So it's quite fitting that here, in January, the sun resides in James the Lesser, because Jesus, in his spiritual essence, is of less material weight and is also in a smaller state of existence, materially speaking. The things you discover, independently, when you stop and really look at things, can be vastly more rewarding than research and reading. And I'd go as far as saying that really looking at the world directly is a kind of reading in itself, and there's definitely value in that. This video started as a point of departure from a few things I noticed about this DaVinci masterpiece some 17 years ago. In working on this little project, so much more occurred to me during its production, and it's left me with a profound sense of gratitude. I hope that considering the meaning of the Last Supper and the cycle of life that it represents, with its rewards and even its troubles, fills you with a similar sense of gratitude. Having said that, I think the next video will be a little lighter. Thanks for listening.